Every morning at 5 o'clock, when the city was still dark and quiet, an old man pushed open the heavy doors of Westfield High School. His name was Robert Chen, and he had been the school janitor for almost 20 years. While most people were still sleeping in their warm beds, Robert was already mopping floors, emptying trash bins, and making sure every classroom was spotless before the students arrived. Robert was 62 years old, with gray hair and tired eyes that had seen a lot in life. He wore the same blue uniform every day, carried his cleaning supplies in a metal cart, and moved through the hallways like a ghost. To most people at the school, he was invisible. Students rushed past him without a glance. Teachers barely nodded in his direction. Even the principal only remembered his name when something needed fixing. The funny thing was, Robert didn't mind being invisible. In fact, he preferred it. Being invisible meant he could watch and observe without anyone paying attention to him. And Robert had become very good at observing people over the years. He noticed everything. He saw how Jennifer Park, the star student, chewed her nails until they bled whenever exam season came around. He watched David Wong pretend to be confident and popular, but eat lunch alone in the library when he thought no one was looking. He observed how the art teacher, Mrs. Patterson, stayed late every evening, probably to avoid going home to an empty house. Robert kept a small notebook in his shirt pocket. During his lunch breaks, he would sit in the boiler room and write down thoughts. Not gossip or secrets, but observations about human nature, about how people treat each other, about what really matters in life. Sometimes he would write quotes from books he had read, or lessons he had learned the hard way. The students at Westfield High came from wealthy families. Their parents were doctors, lawyers, business owners, and tech executives. The parking lot was full of expensive cars that 17-year-olds drove to school. Designer backpacks, the latest phones, brand-name clothes everywhere you looked. This was a school where success was measured by grades, achievements, and college acceptance letters. But Robert saw through all of that. He had learned long ago that expensive things don't make people happy. He had learned that success on paper doesn't equal success in life. He had learned that the most important things can't be bought or measured, not that anyone asked his opinion. To the students, he was just the old man who cleaned up their messes. They dropped trash on the floor he had just mopped. They left bathrooms disgusting without a second thought. They talked over him like he wasn't there. Some kids were polite enough to say thank you when he held a door open, but most didn't even notice. Robert had worked many jobs in his lifetime. He had been young once, ambitious and full of dreams. He had gone to university, earned degrees, built a career that looked impressive on paper. He had owned a nice house, driven a good car, worn expensive suits. People had respected him back then, or at least they had respected his title and his position. But life has a way of changing everything. Robert had lost people he loved. He had made mistakes that couldn't be undone. He had learned that the things he thought mattered actually didn't matter at all. And one day, after everything fell apart, he walked away from that old life. He sold the house, gave away the suits, and took a job as a school janitor. People from his old life couldn't understand it. They thought he had lost his mind. A janitor? After everything he had accomplished? But Robert knew something they didn't. He had found peace in the simple work. There was something honest about cleaning. You made something dirty become clean. You could see the results of your work immediately. No politics, no pretending, no games, and working at a school meant he was around young people. He liked that. Young people still had their whole lives ahead of them. They still had time to learn the lessons that had taken him decades to understand. If only they would slow down long enough to listen. But they never did. They were always rushing somewhere, always stressed about the next test, the next game, the next college application deadline. Robert would watch them run through the hallways between classes, faces buried in phones, ears plugged with headphones, completely disconnected from the world around them. Sometimes he wanted to stop them. He wanted to grab them by the shoulders and say, "Wait, slow down. You're missing everything. This pressure you feel, these grades you're chasing, this competition you think is so important. None of it matters as much as you think it does. What matters is how you treat people. What matters is who you become as a person, not what you achieve on paper." But of course, he never said any of that. Who would listen to an old janitor anyway? So he kept quiet, kept cleaning, kept observing. He watched generation after generation of students pass through these hallways, all making the same mistakes, all learning the hard way. The thing that bothered Robert most was how the students treated people. Not each other, though there was plenty of meanness there too, but how they treated people they considered beneath them, the cafeteria workers, the security guards, the maintenance staff, and especially him, the janitor. It wasn't that they were cruel. Most weren't, they were just thoughtless. They didn't see these people as real human beings with full lives, with stories, with feelings. They saw them as part of the background, like furniture or fixtures. Necessary but not worth noticing. Robert wondered sometimes what would happen if these privileged kids ever faced real hardship. What would happen if they lost everything tomorrow? Would they still think they were better than everyone else? Would they still ignore the people who served them? He hoped they would never have to learn these lessons the way he did. He hoped that somehow, some way, they might learn to see people before it was too late, before they wasted their lives chasing things that don't matter and ignoring the things that do. But hope was about all Robert had these days. Hope and his cleaning cart and his little notebook full of wisdom that no one would ever read. At least, that's what he thought. He had no idea that everything was about to change. It was a Thursday evening in late October when everything changed. Robert was doing his usual rounds, pushing his cleaning cart through the empty hallways. Most of the lights were off and the school felt different at this hour. Quieter, more peaceful. He actually preferred working when everyone was gone. He was heading toward the third-floor classrooms when he heard it. A sound that made him stop in his tracks. Someone was crying. Not the fake crying of a teenage drama, but the deep, painful sobbing of someone truly breaking down. Robert hesitated. His first instinct was to walk away. Whatever was happening, it wasn't his business. He was just the janitor, but something in those sobs made him pause. They sounded desperate, lost, like someone drowning and running out of air. He followed the sound to room 307, the advanced English classroom. The door was half open and inside he could see a girl sitting on the floor, her back against the wall surrounded by papers. Her whole body shook as she cried, her hands covering her face. Robert recognized her. Her name was Lucy Martinez. She was a senior, one of the top students in the school. He had seen her picture in the trophy case downstairs, holding awards and certificates. Student council president, debate team captain. Straight-A student since freshman year. The kind of kid that teachers loved and parents used as an example for their own children. But right now, Lucy Martinez didn't look like a success story. She looked completely broken. Robert stood in the doorway, unsure what to do. He could back away quietly, pretend he hadn't seen anything. But something stopped him. Maybe it was the memory of his own darkest moments, when he had been alone and breaking down, wishing someone would just sit with him. He knocked gently on the doorframe. Lucy's head snapped up, her eyes wide and red from crying. She quickly tried to wipe her face, embarrassed to be seen like this. "Sorry," she said, her voice shaky. "I didn't know anyone was here. I'll clean this up." She gestured at the papers scattered around her. "Don't worry about that," Robert said quietly. He stayed in the doorway, not wanting to intrude. "Are you okay?" It was a stupid question. Obviously she wasn't okay. But sometimes stupid questions are the only way to start. Lucy laughed, but it was a bitter sound with no happiness in it. "Do I look okay?" Robert didn't answer. He just waited. Something about his silence, or maybe just the fact that he was there, made Lucy's walls crumble again. Fresh tears streamed down her face. "I don't know what I'm doing anymore," she whispered. "I don't know who I am. I don't know what I want. Everyone expects so much from me, and I'm so tired. I'm so tired of being perfect." Robert slowly entered the room and sat down on the floor against the opposite wall, giving her space but showing he was willing to listen. His old knees complained, but he ignored them. "These are college acceptance letters," Lucy said, picking up one of the papers around her. "Stanford, Yale, Princeton, MIT. Everyone keeps congratulating me. My parents are so proud. My teachers keep telling me I can go anywhere, do anything. But you know what? I don't want any of it." She threw the letter down like it had burned her hand. "I feel like I've been running a race my entire life, and I don't even know where the finish line is. Or why I'm running. I get perfect grades, but I don't remember the last time I actually enjoyed learning something. I win awards, but they just feel like pieces of paper. I have hundreds of friends online, but I can't remember the last time I had a real conversation with anyone." Robert listened. He didn't interrupt or offer quick advice. He had learned long ago that people don't need solutions when they're breaking down. They just need someone to hear them. The worst part, Lucy continued, her voice dropping to almost a whisper, is that I don't know who I really am. Without the grades and the achievements and the awards, what's left? Who is Lucy Martinez when she's not being perfect? I honestly don't know. And that terrifies me. She looked at Robert, really looked at him, maybe for the first time ever. Does that make sense? Or do I sound crazy? You don't sound crazy at all, Robert said gently. You sound like someone who's been carrying too much weight for too long, and now you're wondering if the weight was worth carrying in the first place. Lucy stared at him, surprised. She had expected him to give her some generic adult advice about pushing through or staying strong. Instead, he had just understood. Can I tell you something? Robert asked. Lucy nodded. I used to be a university professor, Robert said. I taught philosophy. I had a PhD, published papers, went to conferences all over the world. I wore expensive suits and had an office with my name on the door. People called me Dr. Chen and treated me with respect. On paper, I was very successful. Lucy's eyes widened. You were a professor? But how did you end up as a janitor? Robert finished with a slight smile. Life happened. I lost my wife to cancer 15 years ago. She was everything to me. And when she died, I started questioning everything. All those years I had spent building my career, trying to be important, trying to earn respect and recognition. And for what? None of it could save her. None of it could fill the hole she left behind. He paused, looking down at his weathered hands. After she died, I kept teaching for a while, but my heart wasn't in it anymore. I would stand in front of my students talking about big philosophical ideas, but I felt like a fraud. I was teaching about how to live a meaningful life, but I had forgotten how to live myself. So one day I quit. I walked away from everything. Weren't you scared? Lucy asked. Terrified, Robert admitted. But I was more scared of waking up at 70 years old and realizing I had wasted my entire life chasing things that didn't matter. So I simplified everything. I took this job because it's honest work. I clean things and they become clean. Simple, real, no politics, no pretending, no performance. Lucy was quiet for a moment, processing this. Do you regret it? Giving up everything you worked for? Robert shook his head. Not for a second. I learned something important. Success isn't about titles or money or achievements. It's about peace. It's about being able to look at yourself in the mirror and like the person you see. It's about treating people with kindness, including yourself. He looked at Lucy kindly. You're 17 years old and you're already burned out. That's not normal. That's not healthy. And it's definitely not success, no matter what anyone tells you. For the first time that evening, Lucy felt something shift inside her chest, like a door opening, letting in fresh air. After that night, something changed between Lucy and Robert. She started saying hello to him in the hallways. Real hellos where she actually stopped and looked at him instead of rushing past. Sometimes she would stay after school and find him in the cafeteria or the library, and they would talk. Robert never pushed. He never offered advice unless she asked. Mostly he just listened. And Lucy found herself opening up in ways she never had before, not even to her closest friends. There was something safe about talking to someone who didn't expect anything from her, who didn't see her as a collection of achievements. 2 weeks later, Lucy brought a friend. His name was Christopher Hayes, a tall kid from her calculus class. Christopher seemed nervous, fidgeting with his backpack straps. Mr. Chen, Lucy said, this is Chris. He's going through a rough time, and I thought maybe you could talk to him. The way you talked to me. Robert looked at Christopher, who couldn't quite meet his eyes. Only if he wants to talk, Robert said gently. They sat in the empty art room where Robert had been cleaning paintbrushes. Christopher finally spoke, his voice barely above a whisper. My parents are getting divorced. They announced it last month. They've been fighting for years, but I guess I thought they would figure it out. Now my dad's moving to Seattle, and my mom is dating someone new, and they keep asking me to choose sides. I feel like I'm being ripped in half. He looked up at Robert, his eyes red. Everyone thinks I'm fine because I'm still getting good grades, but I'm not fine. I go home and it's like walking into a war zone. Nobody asks how I'm doing. They just keep pulling me in different directions, using me as a messenger or a weapon against each other. Robert nodded slowly. That's a heavy burden to carry alone. The worst part, Christopher continued, is that I'm angry all the time. At them, at myself, at everything. And I don't know what to do with that anger. Sometimes I feel like I'm going to explode. That anger's normal, Robert said. You're grieving. Not just the divorce, but the family you thought you had. That's a real loss, and you have every right to feel angry about it. Christopher looked surprised. Most adults told him he shouldn't be angry, that he should be understanding that these things happen. But Robert was validating what he felt instead of dismissing it. They talked for an hour. When they finally left, Christopher's shoulders seemed a little less tense. As he walked away, he turned back. "Thank you, Mr. Chen. Really." Word spread quietly among the students the way secrets travel through high school hallways. Not gossip, but something else. A whisper of hope. If you're struggling, talk to Mr. Chen, the janitor who actually listens, the old man who understands. Within a month, there were 4 students who regularly sought Robert out. Lucy, Christopher, and 2 others. There was Natasha Kowalski, a junior who struggled with anxiety so severe she sometimes couldn't breathe. And Daniel Park, a sophomore who felt invisible because he wasn't athletic or popular or particularly good at anything that the school valued. They started meeting during lunch period in a small storage room near the gym. Robert would eat his sandwich and the students would gather around, sitting on overturned buckets and old mats. They talked about their fears, their pressures, their confusion about life. And Robert would share what he had learned over his 62 years. "Here's something nobody teaches you in school," Robert said one day. "Your worth as a human being has nothing to do with your productivity or your achievements. You are valuable simply because you exist, not because of what you do or what you accomplish. Just because you are." Natasha shook her head. "That's hard to believe when everyone judges you based on what you achieve." "People judge," Robert agreed. "That's what people do. But their judgment doesn't define your reality. You get to decide what measures your worth. And I'm telling you, the measure shouldn't be grades or awards or college acceptances. It should be simpler than that. Are you kind? Are you honest? Do you treat people with respect? That's what matters. But how do we succeed if we don't focus on achievements?" Daniel asked. Robert smiled. "Success isn't what you think it is. Real success is being able to sleep at night with a clear conscience. It's having people who genuinely care about you, not just what you can do for them. It's learning something new and feeling excited about it, not because it will look good on a resume, but because learning is beautiful. It's helping someone without expecting anything in return. That's success," Lucy spoke up. "You know what I noticed? Nobody at this school really sees each other. We're all so busy competing and performing that we forget there are real people behind all the grades and activities. Like, I've known Chris for 3 years, but I didn't know about his parents until recently. And I never even noticed you, Mr. Chen, until I was breaking down and you were there. That's the biggest problem with your generation," Robert said, not unkindly. "You're connected to thousands of people online, but you're not actually connected to anyone. You know what people had for breakfast, but you don't know what keeps them awake at night. You see everyone's highlight reel, but nobody's reality. So what do we do about it?" Christopher asked. Robert thought for a moment. "Start seeing people. Really seeing them. The cafeteria workers who serve your food, the security guard at the front door, the substitute teacher everyone ignores, the kid who sits alone at lunch. Everyone has a story. Everyone is fighting battles you know nothing about. What if you started treating everyone like they matter? Because they do. What if we did something bigger?" Lucy said suddenly, her eyes lighting up with an idea. "What if we helped other people learn to see each other? What if we showed the whole school that every person here has value? Not just the popular kids or the smart kids or the athletic kids." Robert raised an eyebrow. "What do you have in mind?" Lucy looked at the others, who were nodding with growing excitement. "I'm not sure yet, but I think we need to tell people's stories. The people everyone ignores. Show everyone that the so-called invisible people are actually the most interesting ones." Natasha leaned forward. "We could interview staff members, learn about their lives. Most students don't even know their names. We could make it a project," Daniel added. "Photos and stories. Display them in the hallways where everyone can see." Christopher grinned. "The Invisible People Project. Making the invisible visible." Robert felt something warm spread through his chest, something he hadn't felt in years. Hope. These kids were getting it. They were starting to understand what really mattered. "I think that's a wonderful idea," he said quietly. "But are you ready for what might happen? Some people won't like it. Some people prefer to keep others invisible because it makes them feel superior." Lucy's jaw set with determination. "Let them complain. This needs to happen." And just like that, everything began to change. The Invisible People Project started small. Lucy and her group approached it carefully, knowing that if they pushed too hard too fast, the school administration might shut them down. They began with one person, Rosa Hernandez, who had worked in the school cafeteria for 12 years. Rosa was in her 50s, with tired eyes and hands roughened by years of washing dishes. Most students barely looked at her as she handed them their lunch trays. Some didn't even say thank you. To them, she was just part of the cafeteria machinery, no more noteworthy than the tables or the vending machines. But when Lucy sat down with Rosa one afternoon after the lunch rush, she discovered a completely different story. Rosa had fled Guatemala 25 years ago during the Civil War. She had walked for weeks to reach the United States carrying her 2-year-old daughter on her back. She had left behind her parents, her siblings, everything she knew, because staying meant death. "I came here with nothing," Rosa told them, her English accented but clear. "No money, no papers, no family, just my daughter and hope for a better life. I worked 3 jobs to raise her. Cleaning houses during the day, washing dishes at night, taking care of an elderly woman on weekends. I never slept more than 4 hours a night for 10 years. Where's your daughter now?" Natasha asked softly. Rosa's face transformed, pride shining through her exhaustion. "She's a nurse. Works at County General Hospital. She has a good apartment, a good car, a good life. Everything I worked for. When I hand you kids your lunch and you don't even look at me, I think about my daughter. I think about how I did all this so she would never be invisible like me." The students were silent. Lucy felt shame burning in her chest, remembering all the times she had grabbed her tray without even glancing at Rosa's face. Christopher took Rosa's photo with his camera. In the picture, she wasn't wearing her hairnet or her uniform. She wore her own clothes and a slight smile, holding a photograph of her daughter in her nurse's uniform. The caption read, "Rosa Hernandez. She crossed a war zone so her daughter could heal people." "What did you do today?" They hung the poster in the main hallway on a Monday morning. By lunch, the entire school was buzzing about it. Students stopped to read Rosa's story. Some laughed it off. Some seemed uncomfortable, but many stood there for a long time, really reading, really thinking. The next day, something small but significant happened. The line in the cafeteria moved slower because students had started saying thank you to Rosa. Some even asked her how she was doing. Rosa noticed. Robert, observing from his spot by the trash cans, noticed too. And he smiled, encouraged. The group continued. Next was Harold Wright, the night security guard. Harold was a 60-year-old black man who worked from 10 at night until 6 in the morning. Most students never saw him because he arrived after everyone left. But Christopher had stayed late for a basketball game and met him. Harold's story was different but equally powerful. He had been a published poet in the 70s, part of a movement of black writers trying to give voice to their community's struggles. He had performed his poetry in coffee houses and small theaters, dreaming of changing the world with words. "But poetry don't pay the bills," Harold told them with a gentle laugh. "I had a family to feed, children to raise, so I took night jobs, security work, steady money, good benefits. I told myself it was temporary, just until I got established. But temporary became permanent. The years rolled by and suddenly I was old. Do you regret it?" Daniel asked. "Giving up poetry?" Harold shook his head. "I didn't give it up. I just changed how I do it. I still write every night during my shift. Fill up notebooks with poems about the empty hallways, about the janitors and their stories, about the dreams that kids leave scattered in classrooms. Most people think night security is boring, but I see magic in the quiet. And my kids all went to college. They have good lives. That's poetry too, in its own way." His poster showed him in his security uniform, holding one of his worn poetry notebooks. The caption read, "Harold Wright, poet father, guardian of empty hallways. He chose family over fame and never stopped creating." More posters followed. There was Margaret Kim, the substitute teacher who had been an understudy on Broadway but left to care for her mother with Alzheimer's. There was Luis Santos, the maintenance man who had been a professional soccer player in Mexico before an injury ended his career. There was Patricia Thompson, the school librarian who had been one of the first black students to integrate her high school in the 1960s, facing hatred and violence just to get an education. Each story was different, but they all shared something. These were people with rich, complex lives that nobody had bothered to ask about. They were people who had dreamed big dreams, faced real hardships, made difficult choices, and kept going. They were people who mattered. The hallways of Westfield High began to look different. 30 posters now lined the walls, turning the corridor into a gallery of invisible lives made visible. Students stopped between classes to read them. Teachers brought their classes to discuss them. Even the principal seemed moved, though she worried about the project's message. But the real change was subtler and more profound. Students started greeting the staff by name. They held doors open. They cleaned up after themselves in the cafeteria. They said good morning to Harold when they arrived early for sports practice. They asked Rosa about her daughter. They stopped treating these people like furniture. The group's small storage room meetings grew. More students started showing up, wanting to be part of something real. Lucy found herself leading discussions about empathy, privilege, and human dignity. Christopher taught photography basics so others could help with the project. Natasha, who had been so anxious she could barely speak in class, started interviewing people with surprising confidence. And Daniel, who had felt invisible himself, found purpose in making others visible. Robert watched it all unfold with quiet satisfaction. He didn't take credit for any of it. That wasn't the point. The point was that these young people were learning to see. They were learning that every human being has value, regardless of their job or status or achievements. They were learning the lesson that had taken him a lifetime to understand, but not everyone was happy about the changes. Some students complained that the project was making them feel guilty. Some parents worried their children were being indoctrinated with socialist ideas, and a few teachers felt the project was implicitly criticizing the school's emphasis on achievement and competition. The principal called Lucy to her office one afternoon. "This project of yours," she said carefully, "it's causing some controversy. Some people feel it's divisive." Lucy met her gaze steadily. "Making invisible people visible isn't divisive, Mrs. Anderson. Keeping them invisible is," the principal sighed. She couldn't argue with that. And deep down, she knew the project was teaching her students something more valuable than any test could measure. So she let it continue, though she asked Lucy to be careful and respectful. As winter approached, the project had transformed the school in ways nobody could have predicted. And the biggest transformation was yet to come. Graduation day arrived on a warm Saturday in June. The football field was decorated with white chairs arranged in perfect rows, a stage with a podium, and banners celebrating the class of 2024. Parents filled the bleachers, cameras ready. The graduating seniors wore their caps and gowns, a sea of blue and gold. Lucy Martinez sat in the front row, her valedictorian medal heavy around her neck. Her parents were somewhere in the crowd, beaming with pride. She had her speech folded in her pocket, the one she had written and rewritten a dozen times. But that wasn't the speech she planned to give. The ceremony moved through its usual rhythms. The principal spoke about achievement and future success. The student council vice president talked about memories and friendships. Awards were distributed, names were called. It was all very traditional, very safe, very predictable. Then it was Lucy's turn to speak. As she walked to the podium, she felt her heart pounding. What she was about to do would surprise everyone. Some people would be angry. Some would call her disrespectful. But she knew it was the right thing to do. She stood at the microphone and looked out at the crowd. Hundreds of faces looking back at her, expecting the usual valedictorian speech about dreams and possibilities and reaching for the stars. "Good afternoon," she began. "I'm supposed to stand here and give you an inspiring speech about our bright futures, about how we're the leaders of tomorrow, about how we can achieve anything we set our minds to, and that's all true. We're smart, talented, privileged young people with the world at our fingertips." She paused. "But before I talk about where we're going, I need to talk about what we almost missed while we were here." A murmur ran through the crowd. This wasn't following the script. 4 months ago, I had a complete breakdown in an empty classroom. I was surrounded by acceptance letters from top universities, and I felt like I was dying inside. I had spent my entire high school career chasing achievements, competing with my classmates, building a resume that would impress colleges. And I was successful by every measure that matters to people like us. But I was empty. I didn't know who I was beyond my grades and my awards. I didn't know what I actually cared about. And I felt completely alone. Her parents shifted uncomfortably in the bleachers. This wasn't the triumphant story they had expected. That night someone found me, Lucy continued. Someone who had been at this school for 20 years but who I had never really seen before. Someone I had walked past hundreds of times without acknowledging. Someone who I thought was just part of the background. She gestured toward the side of the field where the school staff were sitting. Mr. Robert Chen, would you please come up here? The crowd murmured louder now, confused. Robert, wearing his janitor uniform, looked shocked. He shook his head, but Lucy insisted. Reluctantly, he stood and walked slowly toward the stage, his old legs carrying him carefully up the steps. When he reached the podium, Lucy turned to face the audience again. This is Mr. Chen. Most of you know him as the janitor. The man who cleans our classrooms and empties our trash cans. The invisible person we walk past every single day. But here's what you don't know. She looked at Robert, who gave her a small nod of permission to continue. Mr. Chen has a PhD in philosophy. He was a university professor for 20 years. He published papers and taught hundreds of students about ethics and meaning and how to live a good life. He had everything our society tells us to want: respect, status, a prestigious career. But after his wife died, he realized something. He realized that all of that external success didn't actually matter. So he walked away from it and became a janitor, not because he failed, but because he chose peace over prestige. He chose honesty over performance. He chose to be rather than to seem. The crowd was completely silent now, everyone listening. When Mr. Chen found me that night, he didn't give me easy answers or tell me to push through. He just listened. He shared his story. He helped me understand that I had been measuring my worth by the wrong standards, and that conversation changed everything for me. Lucy turned to fully face Robert. You taught me that success isn't about being better than other people. It's about being kind. It's about seeing people. It's about contributing something meaningful to the world, even if nobody notices. You taught me that the janitor can be wiser than the professor, that the cafeteria worker has lived a more courageous life than most CEOs, that everyone, absolutely everyone, has value and deserves to be seen. Tears were forming in Lucy's eyes now. Because of you, a group of us started the Invisible People Project. We interviewed every staff member at this school. We learned their stories, and what we discovered was humbling. These people we had been ignoring, treating like furniture, had lived incredible lives. They had faced wars and poverty and loss. They had made sacrifices we couldn't imagine. They had chosen love over ambition, family over fame, service over status, and we had never even bothered to learn their names. She turned back to the audience. My classmates and I learned more from this project than we learned in any classroom. We learned that privilege doesn't make you better. It makes you responsible. We learned that every person you meet is fighting a battle you know nothing about. We learned that the measure of a good life isn't how much you achieve, but how you treat people who can do nothing for you. Lucy reached into her pocket and pulled out a different piece of paper. I have an announcement to make. Our graduating class has voted to establish the Robert Chen Scholarship. It will be given annually to a graduating senior who plans to pursue a career in service. Not the student with the highest GPA or the most impressive resume, but the student who has demonstrated genuine compassion, who has served others without seeking recognition, who has seen the invisible people and treated them with dignity. The crowd erupted in applause. Robert stood there, tears streaming down his weathered face, completely overwhelmed. He had spent 20 years being invisible, and now he was being honored in front of hundreds of people. But more importantly, his lessons were being passed on. When the applause died down, Lucy continued. I got accepted to Harvard. That's where everyone expected me to go. But I'm not going. I've chosen to attend State University instead, where I'll study social work. Because Mr. Chen taught me that prestige means nothing if you're not making a real difference in real people's lives. And I can make more of a difference as a social worker than I ever could as another Ivy League graduate climbing the corporate ladder. Her parents looked shocked. They had known about her decision, but hearing her announce it publicly was different. Her father looked disappointed. But her mother, after a moment, started clapping. Others joined in. Lucy stepped back and gestured for Robert to speak. He approached the microphone hesitantly, clearly uncomfortable with the attention. I don't know what to say, he began, his voice rough with emotion. I'm just a janitor. No, Lucy interrupted gently. You're not just anything. Robert smiled through his tears. He looked out at the sea of young faces, some of whom were seeing him, really seeing him, for the first time. If I can leave you with one thought, he said slowly, it's this. Life will throw a lot of definitions of success at you. Our culture will tell you that success means wealth, status, power, fame. You'll be pressured to compete, to win, to be better than everyone else. And some of you will achieve those things. You'll get the impressive jobs and the big houses and the respect that comes with external success. He paused, making sure they were really listening. But here's what I learned the hard way. None of that matters if you don't know how to be a good human being. None of that matters if you treat people as stepping stones. None of that matters if you make it to the top, but lose your soul on the way up. His voice grew stronger. Real success is simpler than you think. It's being able to sleep at night with a clear conscience. It's having people who love you for who you are, not what you've accomplished. It's making someone's day better just by being kind. It's seeing the people everyone else ignores. It's leaving the world a little bit better than you found it, even in small ways. Robert looked at Lucy, then at the other students who had been part of the project. These young people learned something this year that most people never learn. They learned to see. And if you can learn that lesson, if you can really see other people and treat them with dignity regardless of their status or position, then you'll live a successful life. Not according to society's definition, but according to the only definition that actually matters. He stepped back from the microphone. The crowd rose to their feet, applauding. Not politely, but genuinely, moved by his simple truth. The rest of the ceremony continued, but everyone knew that Lucy's speech and Robert's words would be what they remembered. That night, the local news picked up the story. By the next day, it had gone viral on social media. The Invisible People Project inspired similar initiatives at schools across the country. Students everywhere started interviewing their janitors, their cafeteria workers, their security guards, learning their stories and sharing them. Robert continued working as a janitor. He didn't want attention or recognition, but now when he walked through the hallways, students greeted him by name. They saw him. And in seeing him, they had learned to see everyone else too. Lucy went off to State University that fall. She stayed in touch with Robert, calling him every few weeks to tell him about her classes and ask his advice. The other students from the project scattered to different colleges, but they carried the lesson with them wherever they went. Years later, people would ask Lucy about her time at Westfield High. They would expect her to talk about her perfect GPA or her awards or her achievements. Instead, she would smile and say, "I learned the most important lesson from a janitor. He taught me that everyone matters. And once you really understand that, everything else falls into place." And that was the truth. The cleaner had taught them life's biggest lesson. Not through lectures or assignments, but simply by being himself and sharing his hard-won wisdom with young people who were finally ready to listen. The lesson was simple but profound. See people. All people. Treat them with dignity. Choose kindness over competition. Measure success by your character, not your accomplishments. And never ever make anyone feel invisible. It was a lesson that changed everything. 5 years passed. The world kept turning and life moved forward the way it always does. But the ripples from that graduation day continued to spread in ways nobody could have predicted. Lucy graduated from State University with her social work degree. She took a job at a nonprofit organization that helped homeless families find housing and stability. The pay was modest, nothing like what she could have earned with a degree from Harvard. But every night when she came home exhausted, she felt fulfilled in a way that money couldn't buy. She was making a real difference in real people's lives, just like Robert had taught her. Christopher became a teacher. He chose to work at an underfunded school in a low-income neighborhood, teaching kids who reminded him of the invisible people from the project. He kept a photo on his desk from that graduation day, a reminder of what really mattered. Natasha, who had struggled so much with anxiety, became a counselor. She specialized in helping teenagers deal with pressure and mental health challenges. She told every client about the janitor who had taught her that her worth wasn't tied to her performance. Daniel started a nonprofit organization called See Everyone. It helped schools across the country implement their own versions of the Invisible People Project. Hundreds of schools joined, creating galleries of staff stories and teaching students to value every person they encountered. The class of 2024 became known as the kindest graduating class Westfield High had ever produced. Teachers noticed that the culture of the school had shifted. New students learned from older students that everyone deserved respect, from the principal to the newest janitor. The Invisible People Project posters were now permanent fixtures in the hallways, updated each year with new stories. And Robert? He continued working as a janitor for 3 more years after that graduation. He showed up at 5 in the morning, cleaned the classrooms, and went home in the afternoon. But his days were different now. Students stopped to talk with him. They asked his advice. They treated him like the wise teacher he had always been, even when nobody recognized it. When Robert finally retired at 65, the school threw him a party. Hundreds of former students came back to celebrate him. They shared stories about how his wisdom had changed their lives, how his simple lessons about seeing people and choosing kindness had shaped the adults they became. Lucy spoke at his retirement party. "You taught us that success isn't about climbing over people," she said. "It's about lifting them up. You showed us that the most important work isn't always the most visible work. And you proved that one person who chooses to be kind, to really see others, can change everything." Robert moved to a small house near the ocean. He spent his days reading, writing in his journal, and taking long walks on the beach. Former students visited regularly, bringing their own children to meet the man who had taught their parents about what really matters in life. The scholarship in his name continued to grow. Each year, it helped a graduating senior pursue a career in service. Teachers, nurses, social workers, counselors, community organizers, people who chose purpose over profit, impact over income. The recipients all learned Robert's story, and they carried his lesson forward into their own lives and careers. One afternoon, 10 years after that famous graduation speech, Robert sat on his porch watching the sunset. Lucy came to visit with her 5-year-old daughter. The little girl climbed into Robert's lap, and he told her stories about invisible people and the power of kindness. "Grandpa Robert," the girl said, using the name Lucy's children called him. "Why do people need to be taught to see each other?" "Isn't that easy?" Robert smiled. "It should be easy, sweetheart. But people get busy. They get distracted by things that don't really matter. They forget that every person they meet is just as real and important as they are. So sometimes someone needs to remind them. Like you reminded Mommy." "Like I reminded your mommy," Robert agreed. "And now your mommy reminds other people. And someday you'll remind people too. That's how change happens. One person at a time, choosing to see, choosing to care, choosing to be kind." The little girl nodded seriously, like she understood something important. And maybe she did. As the sun dipped below the horizon, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink, Robert felt a deep sense of peace. He had lived a good life. Not a famous life or a wealthy life or a prestigious life, but a good life. A life that mattered. A life that had made a difference. And in the end, that was the only success that truly counted. The janitor who became a teacher without ever standing at the front of a classroom. The invisible man who taught the most important lesson of all. The simple truth that changed everything. Everyone you meet matters, so treat them like they do. It was a lesson the world desperately needed. And thanks to one tired old janitor and a group of students brave enough to listen, it was a lesson that would continue spreading, one kind act at a time, forever.